It's the Sheena Metal Experience right here on LA Talk Radio. For more info on the show, latalkradio.com, sheenametalexperience.com. Don't forget to email me and let me know what you think of the show. My guest all this hour is returning here to the Sheena Metal Experience. He's a wonderful actor who is right now in a show at the LA Theater Center Theater 2, and it's called The Girl Most Likely To. Please welcome back to the show. The wonderful Nicholas Downs is here. Nicholas, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for being back here with me, my friend.
Sheena, I really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Now, last time you were here, we talked mostly about your film and television career, which is kind of interesting, and not much about your theater career. So now I'm so glad you're here so we can talk about theater, since I love to cover theater here on the show. Did you start as a stage actor?
I did. In Iowa, I did some in Des Moines, different theaters there, and different, as much as I could. And actually, when someone asked me this question the other day, did I get trained in the stage? And actually, both I started in theater and I also started in film and television kind of at the same time. But I did have the opportunity to do a couple shows there. And then when I got out to Los Angeles, I did about 3 shows over the course of about 5 years. And then I haven't done one in so many years.
Wow. Now, has it just been that you've been so busy doing TV projects and film projects that you just haven't had the time?
That has been the focus, and just to give time towards theater, which it does take time. You need to have the rehearsal process,
right?
You need to have just need to block out that time. I've always wanted to look for just the right project, and I was like, I don't want to just take anything. I want something that's actually going to move me, and I feel move people. One of the last projects I had done was Corpus Christi, which is a play by Terrence McNally.
Right.
And it was done at the Lillian Theater, and it was done by a director named Kristen Hange, who now is Tony nominated for Rock of Ages, and she's a fantastic director. And I ended up doing that, and I felt like, wow, that moved so many people. I was like, if I'm going to do something else, I have to really, do something with a little guts and glory.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, tell me a little bit about how you found, because I think the problem with most television and film actors is that you're so busy that you see them do a lot of readings or a lot of staged readings where it doesn't take that much time, but you kind of have to block off a section of your life to do a play.
You do.
So how much of your time did you have to block off for rehearsals and to go into tech and then into performances for this show?
Well, the thing that ended up working out with this particular project, it is an equity project, and they only had a certain amount of time that they could actually rehearse. A lot of shows come into the Los Angeles Theater Center, and it's done by a company called the Playwrights Arena, and they do a lot of shows as well. And so because there's a lot of turnover, there's not that much time for rehearsals. We only had 3 weeks of rehearsal and 2 days of tech.
Wow.
And we only had 1 preview.
Wow.
So it was really, really intense, and we were changing stuff all the way up until opening. And I've never had a rehearsal process that quick, but because it was equity and because everybody was getting paid for it, they just had limited resources in being able to pay somebody for 6 weeks of rehearsal, which you get a lot in Los Angeles because there's a lot of equity waiver stuff done.
Yeah.
Where you can have 5-6 weeks of rehearsal and maybe just pay a certain stipend, and you can get the actors for a longer time period. But this one was really super fast. But we had a really good director. His name's John Lawrence Rivera, and he's done a lot of theater and done a lot of well-known theater in the Los Angeles area. So he has a great vision, knew exactly what he wanted, and I feel like he put the right people in the right places, and everyone came together.
It's wonderful. Now it's fun, right? I mean, when you can do a wonderful play and not have to put 2-3 months into rehearsal. So how long did you actually rehearse for?
For 3 weeks.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think if everybody sort of is on the same page, that's
Yes.
completely doable.
It is completely doable.
It's just a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. And even with equity, there's certain rules. You can't rehearse over a certain amount of hours a week. And so even with that, there's limitations. So you're really having to just work. You can't work over 25 hours a week or 23 or something like that. So even within that world, you're still limited with the number of hours you can do. We also had a choreographer. There's several dance numbers in the show, so we were learning choreography on top of staging and directing and all that.
That's crazy. Now, this is your first time working at LA Center Theater?
Yeah.
Now, what is the what was it about the show that made you want to do it? I mean, did you know right away when you read it that, oh yeah, I want to be in this play?
Well, I had seen the breakdown for it, and it looked really intriguing. I mean, the basic storyline is about a young Filipino boy transgendered, boy to girl.
Right.
And it's kind of loosely based off of a story that happened back in 2002. Gwen Araujo, she was a transgender teen who ended up being murdered. She was brought to a party, and there was a girl there that basically exposed her for, being biologically a boy.
Oh.
And the boys ended up, over hours, basically, slowly killing her. And so it's sort of based off of that. There's ideas from, Boys Don't Cry, in there, but I think it's a story that doesn't get told a lot. I mean, some cinema has told it. Maybe some TV movies have been made off of the subject when something happens in the news, but not a lot is being done about it, and not a lot is being told this ways to tell this particular type of story. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is really intriguing. And then I went and talked to Ken about it, my publicist, and said, I don't know a lot about the director. I don't know at this point. I don't know a lot about the play, the theater company, Playwrights Arena. And he said, no, they're amazing. If you can do a show with them, you'd be in very good hands. So once I got that, I knew that it was something that I had to do.
Well, and it's the transgender community is really one that's just kind of coming into its own. I mean,
Yes.
As a country, I think we've now begun to more wrap our heads around gay and lesbian, and now we don't quite know what to do with transgendered. It's kind of the next thing that middle America has to sort of figure out on its own.
I completely agree.
And I think that it's, we're so sort of backed up and pent up in this country about sexuality because it's sort of our legacy. We're the great-grandchildren of the Puritans. That the idea that you would be attracted to somebody and then find out they aren't what you thought they were
Right.
is a very scary thing for a lot of people. And sometimes in the wrong situation, something gets discovered and there is a tendency towards violence. I mean,
Absolutely. Well, and in this particular case with Gwen, they tried to use, in one of the trials, what they call trans panic, based off of gay panic.
Right.
Which
is like what they said that guy that was on the Jenny Jones show. Wasn't that his
Right.
defense that
Yeah.
he freaked out when he found out that guy was in love with him and just freaked out and killed him?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of a big freak out.
Luckily, it got thrown out in this case. I think more and more people are like, it's like the Twinkie defense, It's like, it's a little
Right.
kind of a joke.
Right.
No.
Yeah. It's hateful.
Yeah, it's hateful.
If
And
you don't like it, just get away from it. I mean,
Right.
if you freak out, if you're attracted to somebody and you realize that they're not the gender you think they are, then just remove yourself from the situation. But
Yeah.
to kill someone or torture them. I
Well,
mean,
in the true story of this, and also in the play, I mean, the people do have sex with Gwen or with the Filipino boy, which is called, his name is Boy in the play, and you start to think, like, we had discussions about this when we were sort of prepping for the play, and we were like, do they know? If you go that far with somebody, in the back of your mind, do you really know? I mean, unless the person is post-op or maybe
Sure.
you wouldn't know, but in these situations that's not the case.
Right.
So you're like, wow, how much did they really know, and is
Right.
it really the fear of other people knowing?
don't you think? I remember when I first saw the M. Butterfly story.
Mm-hmm.
I kept thinking, okay, now I understand that there are some places in the world where people are very naive.
Yeah.
But you've got a mistress for like 30, 40 years, and you have no idea that's a man.
Right.
I mean, I think that becomes almost like a strange kind of convenient amnesia.
Sure.
How could you not know,
Right.
if you were sexually active with somebody for decades,
Yes.
that they were not the gender you thought they were? I
Sure.
mean, I understand in propriety times, the weird things have happened in weird cultures. People have sex through a sheet. I know there are all kinds of strange
Right.
things. But still, that you never, ever suspected. I mean, you would think that somebody is your lover for 30 years. At some
Right.
point, you'd sort of want to see the full Monty.
Well, yes, exactly.
I mean, so I think people they just suspect, but I
Yes.
think they tune it out because they don't want to think
course.
about it.
Denial's just not a river in Egypt, right?
Right. And sometimes I think, especially in our society where younger people are getting very almost genderless
Right.
in the way that they look, that sometimes people who have crossed over to one gender or the other tend to be more encapsulating of old gender stereotypes. Like, a lot of times trans females are very glamorous looking. They really go out of their way to be to the nines, the makeup and the nails and the hair and that sort of glorified old Hollywood ideology of a bombshell.
Sure.
Because they've worked so hard to become a woman.
Right. They overcompensate
Right.
to a degree. That's why sometimes it's a
They
tell.
they
Right.
want to be a woman.
Right.
Whereas a lot of girls are like, I'll just put on jeans and a t-shirt. I don't give a crap.
Sure.
Because it's not something they've glamorized and wanted to be their whole life.
Right.
So then you find men very attracted to that kind of old-fashioned, sexy look in a woman,
Yes.
and then surprise. So
Well, it's interesting you
it must
brought
be
up.
a fun show to do with all the different socio-political elements in it.
It is, absolutely. And you brought up an interesting point. Another point we talked about was that this is not necessarily a sexuality issue, it's a gender issue.
Absolutely.
And in it, there's a line that the mother says to the boy and says, my gay son, and she says, your daughter's straight. Because he sees himself as a girl.
Yes.
And that's how he sees himself, and he feels that way. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's a new thing that's happening. And I've always said this to people, that I feel like, there's gay and lesbian, and even within the gay and lesbian community, I think there's some misunderstanding of people who have gender identity issues.
I agree.
And I think that that is going to be a new thing that happens.
I think it can be terrible, and it hurts my heart when I hear gay and lesbian people say they don't belong with us.
Right.
I think, okay, look, this is the thing. And I will speak as a bisexual person who's also not very popular in the gay and lesbian community. If they're going to round us all up and beat us to death, it's going to be all of us.
Right.
And they're not going to care what letter any of us have.
Sure.
We're all going.
Yeah.
So we need to stick together because of that. So, but I think that it's hard, especially when homosexual people, their whole identity of themselves is to get people to accept man, man, woman, woman. And then suddenly here's somebody who was man, man, now becomes woman, and now is essentially straight.
Right.
And I think for some gay people who have fought politically for rights for so many years, they feel almost like somebody switched teams.
Yeah.
And moved to that other world. But I believe once you're a part of the gay community, you always are.
Yes, and I think for someone to take those drastic steps, if they even went through it surgically, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
You know what I mean? That's a lot to do.
They've been through enough without you harassing them.
Yeah, they don't need to have any extra peanut gallery people stepping up.
Right, exactly. Now, is the character in The Girl Most Likely To, is she pre-op?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
she's a kid still.
Right, 16,
Okay.
15, 16. So there's 8 characters in it, and there's the boy, and he's Filipino, and from my understanding, the Filipino culture, a lot of boys are called boy.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a nickname or sometimes maybe that's the real name. And then there's the mother, and then there's I play 3 characters in it.
Wow.
Yeah. So what happens is there's the modern storyline, and then there's flashbacks to the 1980s. And without giving too much away, there's an interesting twist towards the end when what brings those two worlds together, and you realize why there's the two worlds.
Interesting.
And why it jumps
Okay.
back and forth
I
between
love
the 80s.
that. Okay.
And the 80s happens in the Philippines.
Okay.
And the nowadays the 2012 happens here in America, sort of small town Northern California type of situation. And then there's various characters. So I play an American. I play a man in the Air Force in the 1980s. And then I play a teacher, and then I also play a buddy character, which is a buddy of one of the other a guy from the modern time.
Okay.
Who has interactions with the boy.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's a Mama Seed character that lives in the Philippines in the 80s, and that's my character, the American, has interactions with that character. And he is actually not transgendered. He's actually a drag queen, bakla, which is gay in the Philippines.
That's the Mama Seed character.
Yes, exactly. Where during that time period and where he lives, it's integrated into the community. It's cultural. It's fine. It's almost considered like a sweet one, and there's no judgments. It's almost like a live let live. And there's an interesting dichotomy that's drawn between 1980s Philippines and modern day America.
Yeah.
When you show 30 years later that there's actually that huge of a difference in the way people think.
Whereas we think we're so progressive compared to everywhere in the world.
Correct.
And it's interesting sometimes when you actually look at our day-to-day culture, not the kind of hip, nouveau entertainment we're putting out for the world, but how culturally we are in our small areas compared to how people are in small areas all over the world.
That's right.
And sometimes we're pretty backwards.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a really mixed cast, too, which is kind of interesting. There's a huge influence of a huge Filipino group in the Filipino actors in the play, African American. There's one of the actors is half Korean. Then there's two white guys, 2 Caucasian guys. So it's an interesting mix too of showing different backgrounds and different cultures within the play itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, were you surprised to find out that in the 80s, that in the Filipino community, that a drag queen would be more accepted than?
You know, I'd kind of heard that in particular specific Southeast Asian countries that was the case. I didn't know too much about it. I don't think, obviously it's hit and miss, but I did know that was, I didn't know how open it was. I just had heard of it. The playwright, Michael Primserat, he was the one that sort of obviously did all this research on it. He's an MFA grad.